So, welcome once again. We are here on Inside Movies Galore. This is the crew. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
How is everyone doing tonight? Did you watch a hobo?
did we
Yep.
watch or wash?
Well, tonight's
I mean,
film is directed by Jason
shower today.
Eisener, or Eisenson, and it's from the year 2011. Red Raven, why don't you tell us a little bit about
Fucking
the
amazing.
film, possibly? What? Tell us a little bit of a rundown of what you think it was about.
It was about this homeless guy who wandered upon this town that was full of junkies and prostitutes and crime, and he ends up befriending one of the prostitutes and becoming like going against all the crime and like becoming like a hobo with a shotgun and like trying to take over all of the crime in this town and trying to like shoot up all of the gangs and all of the like the bad people and the like druggies, and he becomes like a badass in this town where there's like all this horrible like crime going on.
Vigilante, I think is the word you're looking
Exactly.
for.
Yeah.
He becomes a shotgun wielding vigilante, and it's
So,
100 times better than it sounds, and it already sounds pretty great.
was this a first time watch for you?
Yeah, it was. It was the first time.
And
And I liked it. I thought at first I was like, "What is this?" I was crazy. Like I had never seen anything like it. But in the end, I ended up really liking it.
when you get a chance, also on YouTube is a short film by the same guy called Treevenge. Definitely check it out.
Yeah.
It's actually on the 2-disc DVD of it or whatnot, and it's actually kind of cool. But
On the 2-disc of Hobo, or what?
yeah, it's an extra bonus film on the 2-disc DVD thing. So
Oh, because I have the collector Blu-ray, and I don't think that's on it.
I don't think it is.
Why
That's
don't
the one we have too.
that's why I don't think it Blu-ray, because they often have extras that the Blu-rays don't have.
But Blu-rays are the superior media format.
Well, they are, and aside from
That
the
is
only person
so
I know
bullshit. I take offense to that. Anyways,
the only person I know who cheaps out on Blueys is the Rob Zombie movies.
But
They have like
in any
multiple
case,
hours of stuff missing from releases.
Katie, was this a first time watch or was this a rewatch for you?
This was actually a rewatch for me. The first time I saw it, I didn't really watch it intently enough. I think I didn't pay enough attention because the first time through, I kind of didn't care for it. I don't know. I didn't hate it, but it was like, it didn't do anything for me. But this time, I actually sat down and really watched it and paid attention. And it turns out I actually really like it. And there was a lot about it. There's a lot about it that I totally dug. All the practical effects were awesome. I'm definitely a fan of that. I'm not big on CGI, so practical effects are excellent in this movie. And again, it was kind of a cool, like, it wasn't as, I didn't feel like the set was as cool as Street Trash in the junkyard, but I did appreciate the graffiti-laden walls of the, crime-riddled town and stuff. I was into that. And I also thought it was, like, in terms of the practical effects they used and, like, the kills and stuff, very, very much like Turbo Kid to me, which was a movie that you guys know that I love.
Yeah.
So I saw the similarities.
There were similarities to Terrible Kid in this that in a way I could see because of the entertainment factor of people's deaths.
Yeah,
there was,
and because it was all done with practical effects too, and sort of that over the top, blood squirting out and like the chick in the bikini like dancing and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I actually watched the special footage of that afterwards, where they show them filming that like on the bonus track, and it was just as dry as I expected it would be. Like, obviously they slowed it down, and really the cinematography was intense because the actual filming of it was so dry and hilarious. I cracked up.
Oh yeah, that was I've been watching I've been watching that shotgun mode track.
Yeah.
To revisit this. That thing added like I didn't even get through all of the extra. I didn't even get through all those clips, and it added like an hour to the runtime of this thing. That's why it was so late coming on. But it's been
there's
incredible.
a bunch of extras. Yeah.
Alrighty. So, Dane, was this a first-time watch for you?
It was, and I had heard about this film when I was in college, and a former friend of mine really loved it, and so it took me this long to finally see it. And I liked it. I liked it a whole lot more than Straight Trash, but actually I like Turbo Kid more, which I can see the similarities. I wasn't like really blown away by the film, no pun intended, but it was still solid. It wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be, or as good as I'd heard it was. Like I echo all the previous statements of the practical effects and the kills and that kind of stuff. For me, the thing that really detracted from it was some very notable lapses in logic in terms of how they build the world of the movie, and then also just like certain things like the plague. Those two characters really didn't need to be there because they felt like they belonged in Turbo Kid instead of in this movie. And I've just seen this same basic story before, but done a lot better. Even in the context of like a violent vigilante movie, or in the context of like exploitation movies, I've seen this kind of thing, but done better. But Rutger Hauer was terrific. He did a
Rutger Hauer is the one that really stole the show in this film. What do you guys think?
Nailed it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Brandon, was this a first-time watch, or was this a rewatch?
Well, this was a rewatch. When it came out, now I admit I didn't know anything about this until it did come out. But once it came out and we saw it at Walmart, both me and my co-host Kotobuki Jake, we both looked at it and was like, okay, yeah, one of us has to get this. This is just the title is just too rich for us to skip it by. And adding Rutger Hauer to the mix just made it all the sweeter. I was not disappointed by it, but I wasn't like over. It was just sort of like I was in the middle of the road with it.
Yeah, that's how I was.
It was, but to me, if you look at it, I mean, we're watching a lot of these 80s type horror, and it was 80s. It was basically much similar to a lot of that. It was the 80s type film, but done in modern times. So if you look at it from that perspective, I think a lot of it's just, we've watched a lot of these 80s films so much that, we compare it to those. But if you're thinking about it from a modern perspective, it is kind of cool because it is sort of a throwback and a nod to those films.
Well, and I also myself got a Quentin Tarantino type of a vibe. Did you not?
I think it was overshadowed by the trauma vibe that I got.
Okay.
Well, there's a reason why you get a Tarantino vibe. Is because the fake trailer, Hobo with a Shotgun, was in Grindhouse, and then they decided to make that one and Machete. They decided to make those into real movies after that.
Wasn't it a contest or something?
It was South by Southwest contest.
The funny thing about that is I think Hobo with a Shotgun and to a lesser extent Machete were better than the actual ones that were presented as Grindhouse.
Better than Planet Terror and Death Proof.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell for me.
The car was cool, but that was it.
I like Death Proof a lot.
Kind of a fetish with Death Proof.
The car was
I'm definitely a fan. I actually have a Death Proof license plate on the front of my car. So I'm a fan.
I'm glad you got to like that film.
Dustin, since we haven't heard from you yet, why don't you? Was this a rewatch?
Oh yeah, this was totally a rewatch. When I first started doing the horror resale thing, I found this at Family Video, and it was $2, and I was like, "Well, that looks weird. All right, it's pricing kind of high." And so I went home, I watched it, and the first time I saw it, I was kind of like, "What's this?" And then I watched it with Andrew, who I wanted to be here, but I'm gonna throw some shade. Shade.
We're picking up on it.
And I was like, "This was kind of weird. What do you think?" And we were about halfway through it, and he was like, and his quote was, "By weird, you mean great?" And it's like, well, and I started getting into it, and I fucking love this movie. Like, I'd argue that it's a better 80s movie than most of the actual 80s movies we've seen. Like, the music is amazing. The plague is awesome. How they just kind of come in out of fucking nowhere. It's like, they fit fine. To hell with that team.
Force them. Doesn't matter.
They're like the coolest part. It's like, you don't hire the plague, you summon the plague. Like, I just love everything about this movie.
And when I first heard about it, I had to eventually pick it up myself. I'd heard a lot about it. Of course, Rutger Hauer is always a good thing because I remember him in Operation Doom and Blind Fury.
He was in Dario Argento's Dracula, which was not good.
He was, but you know, on the other hand, for some reason I didn't entirely enjoy seeing him so rugged, so old. You know, he was so depressing. But you know, that's kind of what made him what he was in the film. It's just I could see his age in this film. You know, and that's not something I wanted to intentionally see, even though he wasn't exactly good looking as an actor.
I've never seen him not be old, so I guess that doesn't apply.
Well,
I guess one of the best parts in the movie, though, is when he finally gets that enough money to buy that lawnmower, and you finally see that smile on his face at that pawn shop when he knows he's going to be able to maybe get that lawnmower.
My best part
best twist ever.
My favorite part in it is when the chick, the hooker, who
Abby.
Yeah, Abby. Right after it's like that moment when she throws that TV down on the floor, like no TV, and then shortly after that, when she gets imprisoned, she goes and does some metal work. When she right after she plays this ditzy blonde. Yeah, let's not take the TV. You know, it's kind of like good. How do you go from ditzy blonde to all of a sudden hardcore metal worker? You know,
I wrote down that quote. It's like, all right, what about the TV? We gotta travel light. Yeah, fuck TV, smash.
Her best badass moment in this entire movie is after she gets her hand in the lawnmower and she comes out with her bloody stump and just kicks his ass and kills him with the bloody stump. Like, yes, that's my favorite scene in the whole movie. I was like cheering about that.
Yeah, that had a really interesting tonal shift too, because all of the violence up to that point had been kind of silly, like kind of the in good fun silly kind of violence, and then for just that moment, like they play it straight, and you can see it play across like the crowd's faces, like for the first time, despite where they live and what they see on a regular basis, they're like disgusted by it.
Yes.
So Dane,
scene was
what is it that you dislike about the film?
Well, which again, I do like the movie overall, but there's stuff that keeps me from loving it, and one of the big ones for me was the fact that the movie kind of succumbed to uh, something that gets in the way of a lot of movies, where they kind of act as if the one town or the one city that they happen to be in is the entirety of the world, of the movie's world, at the expense of logic. In other words, what he's doing is he's cleaning up the streets, okay? And then they have the getting more famous montage where his name and pictures in the paper and all that. If this is in, well, but if this is indeed in modern day, then shouldn't word have traveled to other places outside of this town? I get that these forces and can't be trusted and all that stuff, but it's like, if this is indeed meant to be modern day, then surely he would have made a lot more noise than that.
You must suspend your belief in certain instances.
Well, but here's the thing: like, if that had been set in like the '70s or something, which it has more in common with '70s and '80s, exploitation action movies. If that were the case, then it's like, okay, this is this little.
I'd say it has more of a punk '80s.
Yeah, but you see what I mean?
It was Canada. Like maybe Canada's behind us a little bit.
Well, you see what I mean? It's like they were very unclear about when the story is set, and I'm sure that's by design because they're trying to have it be a throwback or whatever. But it's like, if that were today, then everybody would have their cell phones out, they'd be Instagramming it, and then everyone.
But no one had cell phones in the movie, right?
Well, that's precisely my point. Like, the newest thing that we see. Well, but like the newest things that we see are the arcades, which in that case, then we can assume, okay, maybe this is in the '80s, and
I mean, the only phone that was
clearly in the '80s.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, then perhaps word couldn't have traveled as easily. But you see what I mean, though, is that was sort of unclear.
I honestly don't really. I don't get why that's a. I don't get it, Dane. That's silly.
Well, you're silly.
I have an easy time suspending my belief for situations like that in a movie. Like I don't. It doesn't make or break a film for me necessarily.
Suspend your belief for bullshit like Exorcist, but you can't do it for like a newspaper.
Well, it's more than that. It's just it's a larger thing. It's not just this movie, but like other movies do that, where they treat the town and the city as if it's like they're like nothing else exists beyond the borders.
I like that. I actually like that.
Like in Demolition Man, where the only restaurant in there is Taco Bell.
Yeah, but it just, I don't know. I always find that really ridiculous. Like even in something like almost every Batman movie, they always treat Gotham as if it's the only place in this universe, pretty much. And
because
if Gotham goes, then the world goes.
They name drop other places and things in situations like that a lot of the times. And it just comes off as awkward. Right.
There's too much backstory that needs to be told to explain the rest of the world. Like if everything is contained within this world that we can see and we know how it works based on this 2-hour movie or 90-minute movie. You can do a lot more, I think, within that. When you have to put all the logic of the rest of the world in there, well, then, you can't do a lot of things, or it's harder to explain it.
It's like in Superman. In the Superman films, you see only parts of Metropolis,
Yeah, I don't need to see the entire world, but it's just more like it contributes to sort of this mentality of, I don't know. It just.
But isn't that the comic book movies? I mean, aren't there universes that exist within those movies where certain things are permissible, and that's just how it is within that context?
And that's the thing. Like, I don't mean to like pick apart something that obviously isn't meant to be taken overly seriously, just given the nature of it. It's just like, I don't know. You would think that if this guy was able to do this out in the open, even though the police are corrupt and can't be trusted, it's like you would think that, police in other towns might say, oh, let's figure out what this guy's doing. And, just, I don't know. And I think you could have still made that work while keeping within the spirit of the film. I mean, that's kind of a small thing, but it stuck out to me.
I think this film also portrays a sort of kind of message too, along the same lines of street trash. Because when Abby stood up and said that, well, you know what are we doing? We're going and killing these hobos, and yet most of them have a bed to sleep in, or at least a newspaper to crash down in, and that is their homes. You know.
I wrote down that speech too. Actually, I've got it right here.
Well,
they've got the biggest home of all, the streets. Don't they have the right to clean their home? And it's like, what the hell is going on? I love this.
Well, yeah, as far as like a messagey kind of thing that was communicated a bit more effectively, albeit quite a bit more on the nose than in Street Trash, but still, it was trying to be kind of about something. The other thing for me is like on a storytelling level, I felt like I'd seen it before in the sense of it's the kind of the classical Western trope of the unknown hero with no name who comes out of nowhere and gets in this place and has a lot of fighting factions that he has to get in the middle of, and inevitably he gets on people's bad sides and there's a whole lot of shooting, and it's like A Fistful of Dollars, which was remade from Yojimbo, and then you had like Shane, and Drive was kind of a neo-western. It had that same kind of formula, which also came out in 2011. And it's that same kind of model for storytelling, that the Western hero comes out of nowhere and has to get in the middle of trouble without meaning to, and they don't have a name and that kind of stuff. So I did feel like I'd kind of seen that before, and but I do think that Rutger Hauer's performance was incredible, and I also liked the girl, our leading lady. I really liked her because she actually kind of looked and reminded me a little bit of like Jennifer Lawrence, but obviously didn't have quite the same career path. But yeah, she had a similar look to her, and I thought she actually did a pretty good job.
It was pretty good.
Yeah.
Brandon, if there's anything you can say about the film any more than you have.
Well, I mean, I think basically it's back to that concept. It really is an homage to the 80s type film like Street Trash. I mean, this probably was one of the best films to follow it with, because I feel like that it was a concept of that plus the 80s action film kind of combined together to form a hybrid. And I think it's that. I think it really is the fact that it's an homage that one has to really take that into their concept of when they evaluate the movie. On its own, no, it's not that special. But if I look at it like that, that's to me what makes the film interesting.
Well, it should also be said that this has a lot it owes a lot to other vigilante dramas or thrillers, e.g. Taxi Driver, of course, person in a low class situation who sees that his streets are overrun with crime and that kind of stuff, decides to take matters into their own hands. And of course, not a lot of people know about this movie, but it came out 2 years before. It was called Harry Brown, starring Michael Caine. Absolutely love that movie. Similar premise, except that Michael Caine's also old and not terribly, he's not terribly intimidating, but that was an example of how you could do that. Essentially the same story, but in a more serious, dramatically satisfying fashion. And then also, I have to interject that I didn't really like the Plague. Like, I liked the way that they looked, and I liked that they were set up in context with the video game and everything. I like the foreshadowing, but just stylistically, they didn't really fit to me for that kind of exploitation film. Like, they fit in perfectly with something like Turbo Kid, but it's like, okay, so you have these essentially mythical forces of nature, literally called the Plague, with kind of fantasy armor, and you have that random scene with the octopus, and I was like, okay.
You know they're demons. You know they're demons, right?
Hey,
They are demons wearing armor.
Yeah, but that felt like it was another kind of movie that interjected its way into this other, extreme but more or less, realistic. I put heavy quotes.
maybe like they started one movie and then pieced another movie together.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit like
This movie didn't really have a realistic tone, so I felt they fit perfectly.
Yeah, I'm oddly okay with it as well. It's like,
Like,
it works.
Like, the movie is clearly established as something fantastic, and so what's one more fantastic thing to introduce into that?
Yeah, I know it's not like, again, it's not meant to be realistic or even necessarily serious. It just there's it's a little bit like how certain comedies will do that. Well, they'll have certain types of jokes that are more or less kind of in the realm of reality, and then they'll have something totally cartoonish happen, and you're like, wait, huh? That's kind of how this felt in a way. It felt like a different kind of exploitation movie kind of briefly collided with this very clearly established, more kind of realistic exploitation film. That makes sense.
Red Raven, if there was anything that you could say that you liked entirely about the film, what was your favorite moment in the film?
Another moment that I recognized was when the hobo was when Abby was in the hospital, and the hobo went over to the nursery and was standing in front of all those babies and said, you're all going to grow up to be druggies and prostitutes, and assuming that's how all that whole entire town is. I thought that was interesting.
My favorite scene, actually.
Yeah, I love how it starts off. I was like you once. Well, yeah.
Well, I like that.
Yeah.
Because he really means it, and that's what I think makes it work. And it has a bit of profundity to it, and it kind of is that. The other thing is, because I've seen movies like this before, you kind of get the set. There's also movies like this. Well, technically, Logan came after this, but it's the same kind of older person who finds it in his heart to defend someone younger, and has to go through the character arc before they die, kind of thing. I thought that moment was a good one for his character, because it really did root it in, that kind of, it is tried and true, but it's a good one of the older.
I like that moment.
The older warrior who has to, go on one last charge into, a wall of, going out in a hail of bullets, basically.
I'd never actually seen any movies like this. I still haven't seen Logan, really. I kind of hate westerns, so I don't know westerns.
We'll have to do a western this next time.
Oh, you're rude.
There's some that for people who don't.
Start with any western. I would have to start with the Seven Samurai.
You mean the Magnificent Seven, or going all the way back to Seven Samurai?
Going all the way back to Seven Samurai.
Okay.
Hey, you could still lead in with Duskiden.
Well, once I pick it up.
Yeah, but the point is, I've seen enough of them to get that trope, and it's definitely a classical trope that you can see in, if anybody saw Drive, it's that same kind of thing. The character is referred to as Driver because his name is never spoken about, and he kind of appears out of nowhere, leaves after having gotten in the middle of conflict and things like that,
There is some overlap. The people I know who really liked Drive liked this, which is kind of odd because I personally didn't like Drive all that much. Like, I love the music, but it didn't quite work for me.
It's interesting. I like Drive infinitely more.
Who's trying to eat their mic?
Not me. I like Drive infinitely more than this, but granted, it's a very different kind of. It has some similarities in the structure, but it's trying to be a much more like serious kind of art house action film, and so this is more like an exploitation film, but still, but out of those two, I know which one is closer to my heart, and
Drive isn't a spectacular party movie that makes all your dreams come true.
Well, depends on what kind of party you want to have,
I actually think that the things that made this movie more meh to me, because that's really where it was. I liked parts of it, and I was kind of neutral to parts of it. But what made it that way were a couple. Well, I mean, one, just I didn't really get the major feeling of it that I've gotten from past movies. So it was something that I enjoyed, but it wasn't something that I would remember. But I also felt like it was very clumsily done. That's the word I was looking for at the beginning, is that there was almost a clumsy nature. Like, I felt like they were just trying to throw things in for the sake of throwing things in.
Well, some of those were spectacular, though.
I mean, you got the 50s car salesman who plays Drake, and you got his letter red jacket rich boys going after people and killing them for the fun of it.
Yeah, in the in the behind the scenes stuff, they described those characters as they wanted them to be like evil Marty McFly, and they drove a DeLorean.
Interesting.
Yes.
Which that actually reminds me of my other favorite scene is when they torch the school bus, just because that was that was almost like something that and then the subsequent hijacking of the TV station, that was very Joker-ish, but then it was also kind of like something you'd see in a Trauma movie too. So it was sort of hit me on those two levels.
On the extras, like those pop-ups, that scene had a 10-minute like mini featurette as a pop-up, and so it started off with, it's like, so they're interviewing the director on the set. So what do you think? It's like, this scene's gonna get me.
My grandma's gonna be so mad. What does he say? Or his mom or something like that?
I'm waiting for whatever that noise is to stop.
That's Red Raven. She's doing something over there.
Okay, so quote, the scene's gonna get me in a lot of trouble. Think I'll go to jail? I don't think I'll do prison time, but my mom's not gonna be happy about it.
Yeah.
Oh man, it was so good.
But aren't those the best kind of scenes to shoot, though?
Yeah, probably.
Oh man, like, it was so intense.
Well, and I guess that's what I liked about it, is I tend to be very attracted to intensity in film, and I think that scene had some of the highest moments of intensity to it, and so and of course it's children in peril, and I think when you put those two things together, it's something that it worked for me.
Yeah, children in peril is always a touchy subject. That one always gets me on some level because I'm a mom. So
that's why it's great. That's why I love it, because I know it'll push people's buttons and stuff. Like, that's why when I see it done well, it's like applause, because I feel like if you're able to do that well, then you've hit people's big fear buttons, and therefore you've made a really intense, kind of eye-grabbing, attention-grabbing scene.
Get real close to the screen, kids. Corpse. And then the follow-up to that too. Like, what do you think of that? Because that was awesome.
My favorite scene in City of God is the one where the gang members make the kids shoot their fellow children in the head. It's like it's like a rite of passage almost to be in the gang, and it's like that was my favorite scene, because I was like, this is it. This is what really goes on in the world every day, and it's like, this is what makes the point the strongest. So that in other words, that tends to be what I'm attracted to as a filmmaker.
I don't know if we could really compare City of God to Hobo with a shotgun.
No,
really.
But you get the point, though. It's like, it's how you're able to make a point effectively is by hitting people's big fear buttons and doing it in a way that makes them think.
Well, they weren't necessarily trying to do that so much as, like, what's the most awful thing we can have this character do, and how can we really camp the hell out of it? And then, like, the follow-up to it, like, I loved that, like, when they kill Slick, and, like, the burning school bus comes to take him to hell. It was like, yes! And so, see, they established the rules of the universe when that happens. So the plague can
exactly.
Which, yeah, I wasn't really sure about that when I saw it. I was like, is he hallucinating or what is this? You know, but yeah.
So good.
It's
I never considered a film. I think it's a film that if you can turn off your head for a bit, that's how it was for me on the second time.
Yeah.
The first time it bothered me more. But the second time I watched it, I really thoroughly enjoyed it because I knew right off the bat, just don't bother to think. Just sit back and enjoy the ride. Rutger Hauer is going to take a great ride throughout, regardless.
That's
usually Burn Baby Burn. Like Howard.
That's usually how I am when I watch like a trauma movie. But even there, I feel like at least the Lloyd Kaufman ones.
You know what?
They work to try and make a point of some kind, and I think that the tone is more clearly established as camp, which this one had that, but it also, I think, the serious moments were trying to communicate some kind of drama in there, and Rutger Hauer's performance was so good that you're almost like, if they had gone all the way and made this like a straight drama, then he could have equally killed it, you know, because he was just that good.
Agreed.
I just want to point out one thing. For some reason, the sewer around the neck, that kind of reminded me of that circular contraption that was on Will Smith and Kevin Kline in Wild Wild West for some reason.
It reminded me of Motel Hell, where their heads are stuck in the dirt.
Yeah. Farmer Vincent fritter takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent's fritters.
Yeah.
Perfect party. Cheerful. He's so happy.
Which I like that. I tend to like movies that have their tone pretty clearly established one way or another, and that's the one where the horror comedy tone is established very clearly, and I really like it for that reason. It gets really, really ridiculous, and that's good.
God, I love Motel Hell. Like,
that is a good movie.
There's that song at the end, like the hotel like explodes and like the sign's burning, and then that song, the country song, "You're Eating Out My Heart and Soul."
There's one that definitely should be covered.
And Rory Calhoun. I didn't know who the hell he was, but apparently it was a big deal. But anyway, back to this movie, which is so awesome.
Yeah. Did anyone else have anything else to say?
I do. I wanted to bring up the relationship between Abby and the hobo. I thought it again was there. It reminded me of Turbo Kid in that there was this really wholesome storyline between the two main characters around a bunch of like horrible people and chaos, and I saw that mirrored again in this movie, and I really liked that. I could relate to that. You know, not that I'm a prostitute or didn't grow up with a dad, because I had a great dad and stuff growing up, but there were men in my life. I can remember like my first job, I worked at an auto parts store at 16 years old, and I worked with older guys who kind of took me under their wing, kind of like father figure type of men. And that sort of triggered that memory of, you know, being around men that weren't my dad, but sort of like maybe needed that kind of interaction in their life. So I really clicked with that storyline, even though the movie was totally ridiculous, and I was able to suspend my belief about everything else and then just enjoy it for what it was. I also had that bit of that deep storyline, which was part of why I liked Turbo Kid so much. I really liked Turbo Kid and Apple's relationship in that movie, and the underlying sort of theme to Apple's character and that wholesomeness to her. I saw a lot of that mirrored in this film. And also, again, another like modern movie that looks like an 80s movie or feels like an 80s movie. I love those because I love 80s horror and 80s movies. And I always, if it's a modern movie that's an homage or a throwback to an 80s style, I always end up liking it, I think.
I really like the relationship that Abby and Hobo have, which again, that reminded me a lot of Logan, which again Logan hadn't come out. This beat it by several years, but still, I like the idea of the older warrior who has to find it in his heart to protect someone that he didn't think he could, and that kind of stuff. And again, characters characters have world weariness to them, and who carry a lot of weight around on their shoulders and have to learn to let it go, and that kind of stuff like that can be a nice thing.
One of the best films of this last year for that.
It's my favorite of 2017.
Speaking kind of with all that stuff, what did you guys think about like that crazy bear speech he gives?
Oh, I love that.
That's awesome.
See, that's another moment where, and I'm big on tone because I feel like that was a moment where the potential for this to be like a hardcore, hyper-violent drama was really realized, because all the speeches that he gives with the bear one and then the one with the babies, like that's
You see another side of him.
Exactly.
And that's like something that would work so well had the tone gone for full-on drama, because it's delivered that way and it's written that way. And so that's why some of the more ridiculous moments can stand out one way or another. But then again, because those dramatic moments are very well written and very well done, they help provide that essential emotional anchor for the rest of the film to take place.
Yeah. We almost had two different films here, really. If you think about it, you got the less serious, campy one, and the more serious one that they were trying to portray. I actually think that if they went one direction fully, they could have made this either super campy or super, or not super, but more serious. I think this film could have even been more greater or even more memorable than it was.
Yeah, I would have. That's the direction I would have gone with it, and I would have made it a lot more tonally consistent, or just go full blown ridiculous. Which again,
Exactly.
that's why I love trauma films, because they do know exactly what they are, and they just go for it. Which the mixing of tones in a way that doesn't quite fit to me, that's what kind of was getting me. But had I made it, then I absolutely would have gone for like a much harder, like more serious, hard-hitting film. But that's just my own sensibilities. But
well, I really don't think it would have worked that well as like a super serious film, though, or at least would not have worked in the same way. Like, I feel like if we tried to see like a gritty drama with this plot,
it would have turned out.
Why don't you remake it, Dane? If Dane remakes it, we'll all watch it.
They
review.
already made it. It was called Harry Brown, and then before that was Taxi Driver and Drive and all these other movies. But I haven't seen. I have a movie in my head that, at least tonally and stylistically, is what I'm. Plot-wise, it wouldn't be the same, but a film similar in my brain that I'm remembering right now is In Cold Blood, which is based on true events.
Good one.
That's an amazing film, which again, not quite comparable to this, because the plot is completely different, but in terms of like that kind of like hardcore, violent but insightful but moving kind of story, that's one of my all-time favorites, and that's where my head's at.
As far as another film that has something to do with a small, where they consider it like there's not really an outside world influence. Another film that comes to mind in my mind is Class of 1999. For some reason.
1999. Yeah, I haven't watched that one.
I've seen Class of 84, but not 99.
Class of 1999 has Stacy Keach in it as like some kind of I think he's a high school principal or something like that, and I think there's a lockdown on a school, and there's all kinds of punk kids in there. I think street bikes or whatnot, or I don't know.
I think robots are involved, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
The one movie where they kind of make that a literal thing where there's nothing outside the town is Pleasantville, which I found that
pretty great.
That was kind of refreshing, just because there literally is nothing outside of the borders of the town, or like the Truman Show, where again, that's the whole point. And now that's getting a little almost too literal, but that's there are times when the scale of the events of what's happening in the story, there's a point where like the scale of the events are small enough to where it's okay if the whole movie takes place in a town or whatever, and it doesn't matter. If there was like an alien invasion in this town and nobody noticed, then you'd have a problem. That's sort of the level that I think they're playing on there, especially when the guy's face is in the news, and and yet somehow no other neighboring towns got word of this, because I guess people don't travel outside of this town or what. But yeah, that's sort of, that explains it a little bit more of where my head was at.
Well, I still don't quite understand it. It's like the Superman movie. It's like, oh yeah, Superman's in Metropolis, but what's going on in Spain? We need to establish this place somehow.
Well, no, I mean, even in a Superman movie, that usually what happens in there is affecting a larger scale than just Metropolis. Yeah, that's the main place, but
it's a bad example, but I'm trying to be extreme to emphasize how preposterous the idea sounds to me.
I mean, look at Independence Day. You see all the different spaceships all over the world.
That's almost kind of the other way, though. That's where what's
happening on Mars? The city needs to establish its world.
Yeah, well, that's almost kind of extreme in the other way, because that's literally the entire world at stake, and literally, I don't know. Which again, very different kind of movie. It's like a big sci-fi melodrama, but still,
it's a big budget disaster movie, yeah.
Essentially, but you see, I mean, that's almost extreme on the other sense. It's like, I don't think a pin could drop without it affecting the entire world in a movie like that.
Well,
is there anything else anyone else would like to add?
Did anybody notice? I'm going to talk about the plague just one more time. Sorry, guys. The music that plays when they attack the hospital is this synthwave song that I love, and that's probably why I like that sequence so much.
So
the music was incredible. I love the music.
That the soundtrack.
I like the music too.
The soundtrack was amazing.
So you would everyone would agree that the soundtrack to the film, the music behind the film, wouldn't have made the film without it.
It would. It's a key part of it. It would not have been as good without that music.
Okay.
Yeah, I liked it. I like the opening theme too. I do think that
it had a Cannibal Holocaust kind of vibe in the opening, didn't you think?
Yeah, like theoretically, I think that other kinds of music could have gone there, but or at least keeping in that same genre or style. I don't know if those exact songs or those exact tracks were as essential, but certainly keeping in that style would have been key.
And anyway, so second half of it. By the way, the song is called Hunters, and I think there's some tie-in with I think the guy who ran the pawn shop was in the Y segment of ABCs of Death, which uses a song by, I think, the same guy. His name's Power Glove for the Y is for Young Buck, like the creepy old dude in that segment of ABCs of Death. I'm pretty sure he was in this movie, like as the pawn shop owner. So there's some musical overlap between the two. And then in the Plague's hideout, did anybody notice like the wall of like their previous like targets? Like, did anybody see like the picture?
I did.
Pictures? They have like Abraham Lincoln, Joan of Arc, Jesus, the Easter Bunny, like crossed out. like
Yeah,
somebody sent them after the Easter Bunny. What the fuck was that?
and I did see that, and that was also something I was like,
So Dustin, when you watch a film,
Brilliant.
when you watch a film, you watch the surroundings around the actors, don't you?
Yeah, I like to pay attention to all that stuff, especially if I can tell that they've gone out of their way to like put effort in. If they've put effort into the background, then it's all the more exciting to like look for things. Like I love it when a film has like the Easter eggs and rewards for paying attention.
yeah, I like that too.
And they just kicked butt on it. Like I was looking at the graffiti, like it was the whole
I was
thing
looking at the graffiti too. I was very focused on that. I love graffiti at any time. In movies, in real life. I have a funny graffiti story about magical graffiti that showed up a couple times. I'll have to tell you that story. But I always pay attention, especially graffiti on trains. Love it.
Some of it's pretty
Alrighty.
good. What was my? Oh yeah. What did you guys think about the dude in the Santa costume? It's pretty fucking gross, right?
Yes.
Well, Santa in general is pretty gross.
No, that's not what we meant.
A big fat guy in a red suit with black glasses who takes a whip to 8 tiny reindeer.
And he sneaks into children's homes.
He comes down.
Pedophile Santa.
He comes down their chimney and leaves big presents.
Exactly. I mean, come on.
Ew, that whole sentence was ew.
Well, it's like
That was the line of the movie. Like,
bad touch Satan.
Comes down your chimney and leaves a big present.
Just that scene where we first meet Heather Graham and Bad Santa. Enough said.
Bad Santa was an awesome movie.
I love Bad Santa.
Every stocking was hung by the chimney with hair.
Actually, my favorite scene in Bad Santa is where he's like, "Hey, what happened to your eye?" And it just like cuts to him like beating the shit out of the bully. Just no more explanation. But
Alrighty. I think
anyway.
on that note, we're going to end the show. So why don't we start with Katie? Why don't you start with where you come from and or what you do?
I am. Yeah. Somebody sees Gesundheit.
Yes.
Very last thing. In the robbery at the pawn shop, did anybody notice that one of the robbers had a Halloween 3 mask?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ha ha ha. So we got a Halloween connection.
All right. Anyways, I'm Katie Cadaver from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm a body positive horror artist and alternative model. And you can find me and a bunch of my pictures on Instagram at Third Eye Open. That's 3RDEYE0PEN. I'm also the makeup artist for Milwaukee horror punk band Ratbat Spider. And you can hear their music at ratbatspider.bandcamp.com. And I'm a dead girl for Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics, a horror TV show. And you can find episodes of Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics at vimeo.com/DDCC. And I'm also a performer and producer for Grindhouse Tees Burlesque Productions. And you can check us out on facebook.com/Grindhouse Tees. And we do have a show coming up in April, a punk rock show called Dead on the Dance Floor. So check that out.
Cool. Red Raven, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you do?
I'm Red Raven, and I'm from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and I'm a promoter, music promoter from the Milwaukee area, and I'm also a dead girl at Deadger's Dark Coffin Classics.
Very cool. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, where you're from?
Who was it?
Brandon. Why
Tell
don't
us who
you
you are.
Tell us who you are, what you do, where you're from.
Me. Well, I'm Brandon. I run a site called Septum Sin versus the World, which is a YouTube channel dedicated to physical media We do movie reviews. We do pickup videos. We, of course, fill people in on the news as to what's coming out every week on DVD and Blu-ray. And, of course, we try to do various vlogs. And the one major thing to look forward to coming up is the Oscar season. Next week, we're going to be doing our Oscar prediction blogs, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be interesting, and we're all going to be sitting riveted on the big couch for the Oscar ceremony.
Cool. I can leave you to the Oscar things because I could not give a fuck. But I will definitely check out your channel or on it and let you know what I think. Dane. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and where you're from?
Well, I am Dane Kyle. I am an independent writer and director from Charlotte, North Carolina. And let's see, you can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Let's see, I'm going to be shooting a short film soon, hopefully to be included in a horror anthology. I finished the behind-the-scenes documentary for a different horror anthology that I already got in. We just need to our short needs to officially be added to IMDb so I can talk about it and promote it. I got a fan film that is on IMDb and pre-production. So, and that's not even counting the web series I'm working on. It's just there's a lot coming, a lot on the way.
Sweet.
Alrighty. Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you do?
Last thing that I remembered, there was an alternate ending where she wakes up in the plague's lair and the remaining plague guy puts a mask on her and she becomes the new partner. Even getting she gets a 4 shotgun barrel arm as a replacement thing. Anyway, I'm Dustin. I live here in Milwaukee and go to UW. I collect horror, anything I can get my hands on really at this point. I have an Instagram where I show off my stuff, DHR Hunter, all one word on Instagram. Follow me. Also, like, share, and subscribe to this podcast so that we can have further incentive to keep doing this because I love it. And yeah, I just like sharing what I know about movies, so that's why I'm here. I talk a lot, you can probably tell, so sorry, everyone.
Alrighty, and my name is David Strege. I'm your host of Inside Movies Galore. I also run a blog called Movies Galore Milwaukee, and a group with the same name. And I'm also a part-time producer. I have some things coming out this year. Definitely check them out. One's called Wrestle Massacre, directed by Brad Twigg. Not sure when that's coming out, but I'll definitely keep you posted. And I'm working on some projects with Dane, so definitely keep a lookout for that. So stay tuned. Next week, I will be updating the page with what we will be watching next week. So thank you once again. Everyone say good night.
Good night.
Right.
Good night.
Good night. Like, share, subscribe.